Nicandros Draven had ruled the night courts of Agrius for 600 years, king of obsidian fortresses, lord of crimson banners that drank moonlight, commander of armies that made empires kneel. Yet none of his titles mattered the night Prince Callisto's vanished from his cradle, leaving behind only the scent of wolfsbane and a torn scrap of violet silk. The council told him to forget. Take another consort, create another heir under the next blood comet, a century from now. Instead, the immortal king did something no vampire had ever imagined. He started walking mortal streets like a beggar of shadows, pinning missing child posters on human lampposts, wolf territory markers, and cathedral pillars, trading ancient jewels for whispers, haunting alleys for rumors. 6 lunar cycles, 182 nights of searching. His kingdom thought him mad. His enemies whispered he was weak. His court barely hid their contempt. But Nicandros did not care. The boy with silver-blonde hair and violet eyes, the only vampire born under the blood comet in 3,000 years, was the future of their dying race. Without him, extinction was not a fear. It was a certainty. On this particular evening, frost clung to the stones of the old cathedral like frozen tears. The street was empty except for the hiss of wind through bare autumn trees. Golden light from distant houses mocked the darkness where Nicandros stood. He pulled another poster from the leather satchel at his side. His son's face stared back at him. Pale skin, 2 wise eyes for a child of 4, a small smile captured in a moment Nicandros would never get back. Missing child. Nicandros Draven, son of King Nicandros. Reward, anything you desire. He pressed the paper against the cold stone pillar with a gloved hand, smoothing it carefully as if the poster itself were precious. The tape resisted in the cold. He tried again, fingers trembling despite centuries of perfect control. Please, he whispered to the empty air. Someone must know where you are, my son. The words tasted like ash, a king reduced to begging shadows. He had searched every wolf territory within 3 kingdoms, raided black markets, interrogated traffickers until they screamed for death, followed false leads that ended in empty rooms and colder trails. Nothing. His court said the boy was dead, that he should accept it and move forward. But fathers do not move forward. They break. And Nicandros had shattered the night his son disappeared. The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the cobblestones. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a sound that made his jaw tighten. Wolves. Always wolves lurking at the edges of his empire, testing boundaries, stealing what was not theirs. He stepped back to look at the poster one final time, committing the moment to memory alongside all the other failures. Then a tiny voice cut through the silence like a blade. Sir, that boy lives in my house. Nicandros froze. His ancient heart, a muscle that barely beat, suddenly thundered in his chest. He turned slowly, every predatory instinct screaming alert. A small girl stood on the sidewalk, no more than 6 years old. Her red hair was tangled and dirty, hanging in matted waves around a face smudged with grime. She wore a torn grey tunic several sizes too large, the hem dragging in the dirt. Her feet were bare despite the cold, toes curled against the frozen stone. But it was her eyes that stopped him, wide, frightened, honest, and fixed on the poster. What did you say? His voice came out rougher than intended, edged with 6 months of desperate hope and shattered dreams. The girl took a half-step back, clearly afraid, but she pointed at the poster with a trembling finger. That boy, sir, the one in the picture. He lives in my house. The world tilted. Nicandros knelt slowly, forcing himself to move with human gentleness, despite every fibre of his being screaming to grab the child and demand answers. Up close he could smell wolf on her, pack scent, unwashed fur, the bitter tang of fear that clung to Omega's like a second skin. "Are you certain?" he asked, barely breathing. "This boy? Specifically this one?" She nodded, still pointing. "Yes, sir, he's quiet. He doesn't play much. He draws castles all the time. Black castles with tall towers." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And he cries at night. He talks in his sleep sometimes." Nicandros felt his hands begin to shake. He pressed them against his knees. "What does he say when he talks in his sleep?" The girl bit her lip, glancing over her shoulder as if checking for eavesdroppers. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "He says, 'Father, Father Nicandros,' over and over. And he says it in the old words, the ones Alpha Zarex gets angry about. The old words, ancient vampire tongue, a language no wolf child should know, a language Nicandros had whispered to his son every night before sleep. May darkness keep you, little prince. May shadow hold you. May your father find you always." Time stopped. The cathedral bells, the distant sounds of the city, his own breath. Everything suspended in that single, impossible moment. "Oh, gods," he whispered, bringing one hand to his mouth. "Oh, gods, it's really him." Tears, something he had not shed in 2 centuries, burned behind his eyes. The girl watched him with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Are you okay, sir?" Nicandros looked up at her, this tiny Omega child with dirt on her face and truth on her tongue, and felt his entire world crack open. "Where?" The word came out broken. "Where is your house, child?" "Please." She pointed down the shadowed street toward the wolf districts. "It's not far. Maybe 10 minutes walking." "But, sir," she hesitated, fear creeping into her expression. "Alpha Zarex says I'm not supposed to talk about the boy. He gets really angry when I do. He calls him the asset. We're not allowed to use his real name." "Asset." The word hit him like a blade. Not child, not boy. Asset. Something cold and murderous unfurled in Nicandros's chest. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Thalia, sir. Thalia Vorenos." "Thalia," he repeated, committing it to memory. "I need you to do something very brave for me. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. "I need you to tell me everything you know about this boy. Everything about where he lives, who guards him, what they do to him." His voice hardened. "And I need you to tell me about Alpha Zarex." Thalia glanced around nervously, then stepped closer, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "Sir, I don't think it's just wolves. I think there's something bigger, something scary." Nicandros leaned in. "Tell me." Thalia took a shaky breath, her small hands twisting in the fabric of her tunic. "The boy, the one you're looking for, he doesn't go outside. Ever. They keep him in a room on the 2nd floor. It has bars on the windows and strange marks carved into the doorframe. Marks that glow sometimes at night." Nicandros's jaw clenched. Blood runes. Someone had sealed his son behind vampire binding magic. "Go on," he urged quietly. "There are 12 children in the house," Thalia continued, her voice small. "Some are wolves like me. Some are human. Some are... She paused, searching for words. Different. Special, Alpha Zarex calls them. He keeps notebooks about all of us, lists with our names and numbers next to them. Numbers, Nicandros repeated, his voice dangerously soft. What kind of numbers? I don't know. I can't read very well. But I've heard him talking to the others, the ones who come at night. They talk about prices, about buyers, about shipments. A muscle twitched in Nicandros's jaw. Trafficking. They were trafficking children. Who comes at night? He asked. Describe them. Thalea's eyes darted around again, as if the shadows themselves might be listening. Some are wolves, big ones with scars and mean eyes. But some are, she lowered her voice even further, like you, sir. Pale, beautiful, with eyes that glow in the dark. They wear fancy clothes and speak in that old language the boy uses. Vampires, rogue vampires working with wolves to steal and sell children. The realization hit Nicandros like a physical blow. This was not just a wolf pack acting alone. This was organized, coordinated, a network that spanned both species. How long has the boy been there? He asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Thalia thought for a moment. Since before the last winter. Maybe 6 moons? I'm not sure. Time is hard to count. 6 lunar cycles, the exact amount of time since Callistos disappeared. Does he... Nicandros had to force the words out. Does he seem hurt? Sick? Not hurt like bleeding, Thalia said carefully. But he's always tired. And sometimes his wrists have marks on them, like something was tied too tight. And he won't eat meat, only bread and fruit. Alpha Zarex gets mad about that, says he's wasting good food. Of course. Vampire children could not digest mortal meat. They required specialized sustenance. Nicandros closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself. When he opened them again, they burned with an intensity that made Thalea take an involuntary step backward. Thalea Vorenos, he said, each word deliberate and measured. You have just given me the greatest gift anyone has offered in 600 years. You have given me hope. The little girl blinked up at him, confusion clear on her face. I need you to do one more brave thing, Nicandros continued. I need you to go back to that house and act as if this conversation never happened. Can you do that? Thalia's eyes widened with fear. But what if Alpha Zarex finds out? What if he smells you on me? Nicandros reached into his coat and withdrew a small vial of clear liquid. This is essence of winter rose. It will mask any scent I've left. Rub a drop on your wrists and neck before you return. He pressed the vial into her small hand. And Thalia, do not do anything that might put you or the boy in danger. Do not try to help him escape. Do not tell him I'm coming. Just watch. Listen. And if you can, try to find out when the next meeting with the nighttime visitors is scheduled. Why? Thalia whispered. Because I'm going to need to know exactly when to come for him. And when I do come, Nicandros's voice dropped to something ancient and terrible. I'm going to burn that house to the ground and everyone in it who hurt my son. Thalia shivered, but not entirely from fear. There was something in the vampire king's words that felt like justice, like protection, like the kind of strength she had never known. Will you? She hesitated. Will you take the other children too, when you come? Nicandros looked at her for a long moment, truly seeing her for the first time. This Omega child, beaten and discarded by her own kind, still had the courage to think of others. Yes, he said quietly, every single one. I promise you, tell. Thalia, no child will be left in that place. A single tear rolled down Thalia's dirty cheek. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll help you. Good. Now go, before anyone notices you're gone. Thalia turned to leave, then paused and looked back. Sir, that boy, the one you're looking for. He draws you too sometimes. A man with a crown. He says it's his father. He says his father will find him. Nicandros felt something break and rebuild simultaneously in his chest. He's right, the Vampire King said softly. His father has found him, and nothing in this world or the next will stop me from bringing him home. Thalia nodded once, clutched the vial tightly, and disappeared into the shadowed streets. Nicandros remained kneeling on the cold cobblestones for a long moment, staring at the poster of his son. Feeling the weight of 6 lunar cycles of grief and rage and desperate hope crash over him like a wave. Then he stood, straightened his coat, and walked back toward the dark heart of his kingdom. He had planning to do, guards to rally, traitors to identify. Because if vampires were involved in his son's kidnapping, that meant the rot went deeper than wolf territory. It meant someone in his own court had betrayed him. And when Nicandros Draven discovered who, when he finally tore the truth from the shadows and held it bleeding in his hands, there would be a reckoning that would echo through the night courts for centuries to come. The Vampire King was done begging. Now he would take back what was his. The house Thalia called home was not a home at all. It was a kennel dressed in human architecture. From the outside, it looked like any other deteriorating building in the Wolf District. Sagging shutters, cracked foundation, weeds choking the front path. But inside, the air tasted of fear and wolfsbane, of children who had forgotten how to cry loudly. Thalia had lived there for as long as she could remember. She was Omega-born, the lowest rank in a pack that treated ranks like iron law. Omegas cleaned, Omegas served. Omegas kept silent and made themselves small. Alpha Zarex Murkon ruled the house with fists and snarls. He was a massive man, all scarred muscle and cruel eyes, his wolf more beast than man. He kept 12 children in the house at any given time. Some wolf pups, some stolen human children, some other things. Things he called special inventory. The boy Thalia knew as the asset lived in the smallest room on the 2nd floor. A room with bars on the windows and symbols carved into the doorframe that made Thalia's skin crawl whenever she passed. She brought him food twice a day, thin soup, hard bread, sometimes a bruised apple if she could steal one from the kitchen. The boy never spoke much. He had pale, almost translucent skin that seemed to glow faintly in darkness. His hair was silver blonde, unusual for any wolf pup. His eyes were violet, a color that made the pack adults uncomfortable. He spent most of his time drawing, black castles with impossible towers, moons dripping red, figures in crowns and cloaks. "Why do you draw these?" Thalia had asked once, sitting cross-legged beside him on the floor. The boy, Callistos, though she did not know that name yet, had looked at her with eyes too old for his small face. "I don't know. I just remember them." From before. Before what? Before here. Before the forgetting. And then he had returned to his drawing, hands trembling around the charcoal stub. The worst part was the nightmares. Every night, around the 3rd bell, Callistos would start crying in his sleep. Soft at first, then building into sobs that made Thalia's chest hurt. She was not supposed to go to him. Omegas stayed in their floor space in the kitchen, but she could not help it. Something about his crying felt wrong. like a wound that would not close. So she would creep up the stairs, avoiding the boards that squeaked, and slip into his room. He would be curled on the thin mattress, tears streaming down his pale cheeks, hands clutching at nothing, and he would whisper in a language Thalea did not understand. Pateras, Pateras Nikandros, Thamivris, Thamivris. The words were smooth and ancient, nothing like the guttural wolf tongue or common speech. Shh, Thalea would whisper, sitting beside him. It's okay. You're okay. Sometimes her voice would wake him. Other times, she would just sit there until the nightmare passed and his breathing evened out. Once she had asked Alpha Zarex what language the boy spoke. The backhand had split her lip and sent her sprawling. You don't ask questions about the asset, Zarex had snarled, looming over her. You don't talk about what he says. You don't talk about what he draws. You feed him, you leave. Understand? Yes, Alpha. If I hear you've been telling outsiders anything about him, I'll sell you to the fighting rings. Omega bitches don't last long there. Thalia had nodded, tasting blood, and never asked again. But she remembered. She remembered the old words, the way the boy drew castles like he had lived in them, the way he flinched from sunlight, the way he never ate the meat they brought him, only bread and fruit. And now, after seeing the poster, she understood. The boy in her house was not a wolf at all. He was a prince. 3 nights after meeting the Vampire King, Thalea made a decision that would change everything. She was cleaning Alpha Zarex's office, a task given to Omegas because they're too stupid to understand what they see anyway, when she noticed something odd. One of the floorboards near the desk did not sit flush with the others. Thalea glanced at the door. Zarex was downstairs in the fighting pit, watching 2 betas spar. She could hear the shouts and snarls through the floor. She had maybe 10 minutes. Heart pounding, she knelt and worked her small fingers under the board. It came up with a soft creak, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside was an iron box. No lock, just a simple clasp. She opened it. Papers. Dozens of them, lists written in multiple hands, names, ages, descriptions, prices. Her stomach turned as she read. Omega male, age 7, blonde, obedient. 400 gold. Hybrid girl, age 5, fire affinity, 1,200 gold. Human twins, age 8, matched set, 600 gold. Children, they were selling children. Her hands shook as she flipped through more pages. Then she found it. A page marked with a wax seal, a crimson crest she did not recognize. Asset number 1. Vampire Prince Nikandros Kallistos Draven. Age 4 cycles. Blood status, heir to Egrius throne. Special notes, born under blood comet. Unique properties, high-value commodity. Buyer, Lord Perdicus. Payment, 50,000 night gems, plus territorial concessions. Delivery date, next blood moon. Beneath the text was a symbol, an elaborate crest with a serpent coiled around a chalice. Thalea could not read all the complex words, but she understood enough. They were going to sell Callistos, and the buyer was someone important, someone with a vampire crest, someone inside the Vampire King's own court. She carefully tore off a corner of the page, just enough to show the crest and the name Perdicas, and tucked it into her tunic. Then she replaced everything exactly as she had found it, and ran. The streets between the Wolf District and the Vampire Quarter were a dangerous place for an Omega child alone at night. Thalea knew this. She had been warned her entire life never to venture beyond pack territory after dark. But the scrap of paper burning against her chest felt more important than safety. She ran through narrow alleys, her bare feet silent on cold cobblestones. Twice she had to hide from patrol wolves. Once she pressed herself into a doorway as a group of drunk humans stumbled past. The Vampire King had told her where to find him if she discovered anything important. The Black Rose Cathedral, he had said. Ask for sanctuary and wait in the garden. I will come. The cathedral loomed ahead, tall dark stone and stained glass windows that glowed faintly with candlelight from within. Thalia had never been inside a church before. Pack wolves did not worship human gods. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and slipped inside. The interior was vast and silent. Rows of empty pews stretched toward an altar draped in black cloth. Candles flickered in iron holders, casting dancing shadows on stone walls. A figure in dark robes emerged from the shadows. A priest, though his eyes glowed faintly red in the candlelight. Vampire clergy. Thalia had heard of them but never seen one. "Child," the priest said softly, his voice like velvet over steel. "What brings you here at this hour?" Thalia's voice came out small and shaky. "I seek sanctuary. I need to speak with King Nicandros." The priest's expression did not change, but something shifted in the air. He nodded once. "Come with me." He led her through a side door into a walled garden. Moonlight filtered through bare trees. Stone benches lined gravel paths. In the center stood a fountain, though no water flowed. "Wait here," the priest instructed. "He will come." Then he was gone, moving with the unnatural silence of his kind. Thalia sat on one of the benches, hugging herself against the cold. She had never felt so small, so alone, so terrified of what she had discovered. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange in the garden. Then the air changed, the temperature dropped, shadows deepened, and Nicandros Draven stepped out of the darkness as if he had been part of it. "Thalia," he said quietly, "you came." She stood quickly, fumbling with her tunic. "I found something. Something bad." She pulled out the torn scrap of paper and held it out with trembling hands. Nicandros took it carefully, as if it might shatter. He moved closer to a pool of moonlight and studied the fragment. Thalia watched his face change, watched 6 centuries of control crack and splinter, watched rage and betrayal and terrible understanding dawn in those ancient eyes. "Perdiccas," he whispered. The name sounded like a death sentence. "Who is he?" Thalia asked. Nicandros looked at her, and for a moment she saw the full weight of his fury. "My High Chancellor, my most trusted advisor for 200 years. The vampire I would have trusted with my life." His hand tightened on the paper, crumpling it slightly. "Where did you find this?" "In Alpha Zarex's office. There's a whole box of papers, lists of children, prices, buyers. Callistos is listed as asset number 1. They're planning to deliver him on the next blood moon. That's in 5 nights. 5 nights. Nicandros closed his eyes, breathing slowly through his nose. When he opened them again, they burned like coals. "Thalia Vorenos," he said quietly. "You have just saved my son's life, and you have exposed a betrayal that goes to the very heart of my kingdom." He knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes at her level. "What you have done tonight took extraordinary courage, but I need to ask more of you. I need you to go back to that house. I need you to watch and listen. I need you to tell me if anything changes, if they move the children, if the buyers come early." Thalia felt fear coil in her stomach. What if they find out? What if Alpha Zarex discovers the paper is missing? Nicandros reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather pouch. Inside, Thalea glimpsed gold coins that glinted in the moonlight. If anything goes wrong, if you feel you are in danger, you run. You come straight here. The priests will protect you. And when this is over, he paused, choosing his words carefully. You will never have to go back to that house. You have my word. Thalea stared at the vampire king, this ancient creature who knelt before a dirty Omega child and spoke to her like she mattered. "Why are you being kind to me?" she whispered. "Because you are being brave for my son," Nicandros said simply. "Because you did not have to help me, and you did anyway. Because I have lived 600 years, and I know courage when I see it." He stood and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. 5 nights, Thalia. Then I come for all of you. Can you hold on for 5 more nights? Thalia thought of Callistos crying in his sleep, thought of the other children locked in cages, thought of the ledger with its terrible list of prices. "Yes," she said. "I can hold on." "Good. Now go. Use the winter rose essence again." "And Thalia," he added as she turned to leave, "if you see the boy, if you get a chance to speak to him, tell him something for me." "What?" "Tell him." Nicandros's voice broke slightly. "Tell him his father is coming. Tell him to hold on just a little longer." Thalea nodded, tears burning in her eyes, and disappeared into the night. Nicandros stood alone in the garden, the crumpled scrap of paper still clutched in his fist. Perdicus. The name echoed through his mind like a poison. He had trusted that vampire, had elevated him, had shared strategies and secrets and the running of an entire kingdom. And Perdicus had stolen his son, had sold him like livestock to the highest bidder. The rage that filled Nicandros in that moment was older than empires, colder than winter, more terrible than any battlefield slaughter. He would tear Perdicus apart. But not yet. First, he needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal. Needed to know who else was involved. Needed to plan a strike that would shatter this trafficking ring completely. He turned and walked back into the cathedral, his footsteps silent on ancient stone. The priest was waiting in the shadows. "Summon the loyal guard," Nicandros said quietly. "Tell them to come armed and ready. Tell them we ride in 5 nights, and tell them that anyone who questions my orders will answer to me personally." The priest bowed. "It will be done, my king. And send word to Commander Iskander. I need intelligence on every vampire who has had contact with wolf packs in the last year. I need names, movements, transactions." The priest hesitated. "My lord, if we start investigating the court, if we begin questioning nobles, it could trigger a civil war." "Then let it," Nicandros said, his voice like iron. "I will burn my own kingdom to ash before I let them keep my son 1 more night than necessary." He strode toward the cathedral doors, his crimson coat billowing behind him like wings. 5 nights until the blood moon. 5 nights to prepare. 5 nights until the vampire king would remind the world why his name had once made armies tremble and empires fall. The hunt was over. Now came the reckoning. Nicandros stood in the great hall of his obsidian palace, the crumpled scrap of paper clutched in his hand, and felt 6 centuries of control shatter. Perdicus. The name echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. His High Chancellor, his most trusted advisor for 200 years, stood at the base of the throne steps, face carefully neutral. "My lord?" Perdicus asked, his tone measured and calm. "How long?" Nicandros's voice was quiet, deadly. "How long have you been selling children?" The court went silent. 20 vampires, the highest nobles of Agrius, frozen in shock. Perdiccas's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of calculation. I don't know what you mean, my king. Perhaps if you explained what has upset you, we could address this misunderstanding. Don't lie to me. The words came out soft, but the rage beneath them made the torches flicker. I have the ledger. I have your crest. I have the contract for my son's sale. Gasps rippled through the court like stones dropped in still water. Perdiccas straightened, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. My king, I think you have been misled by false information. The grief of losing Prince Callistos has clearly affected your judgment. Perhaps you should rest and allow the council to investigate these accusations properly. Nicandros descended the steps with inhuman speed, stopping inches from Perdiccas's face. Do not presume to tell me what I need. Do not presume to question what I know. You arranged my son's kidnapping. You have been working with wolf packs, trafficking children, hybrid, omega, gifted, to rival bloodlines and distant covens. For what? Gold? Power? Territorial expansion? The hall held its breath. Perdiccas met his king's eyes without flinching. For survival, my king, your obsession with that child has blinded you to reality. We are a dying race. Our bloodlines weaken with every generation. We need alliances. We need resources. We need new territories to hunt and new sources of power to sustain us. So you sold my heir. I sold a resource to secure our future. The boy was born under the blood comet. Yes, that makes him valuable. 50,000 night gems and territorial concessions from the eastern covens will do far more for our people than one child ever could. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Nicandros smiled, a terrible, cold expression that made even ancient vampires step back. You just declared war on your king. Perdiccas moved fast, drawing a blade laced with wolfsbane. The council supports me, Nicandros. You are mad, unfit to rule. We have already begun discussions about succession, this obsession with a lost child, this degrading yourself by walking mortal streets like a beggar. It ends tonight. He lunged. Nicandros did not bother to dodge. He caught Perdiccas by the throat mid-strike, lifted him off his feet, and tore out his windpipe with his bare hand. The Chancellor collapsed, black blood pooling on white marble, his eyes wide with shock as death claimed him. Nicandros dropped the torn flesh and turned to face his court, his hand dripping with his advisor's blood. Anyone else? He asked calmly. No one moved, no one breathed. Good. He wiped his hand on a cloth provided by a trembling servant. Now, I need the names of every vampire who has been in contact with wolf packs in the last year, every noble who has expressed interest in alternative revenue streams, every courtier who has questioned my fitness to rule. My king, one of the older nobles ventured carefully, if we begin purging the court based on suspicion alone, we risk destabilizing the entire kingdom. I don't care, Nicandros said flatly. My son is being held by wolves and traitor vampires in a trafficking kennel. He will be sold in 5 nights unless I stop it. So you will give me the names I require, or you will join Perdiccas on the floor. He walked back up to his throne and sat, his crimson coat settling around him like pooled blood. Commander Iskander, he called. A lean vampire with silver scars across his face stepped forward. My king, assemble the loyal guard, 20 of our best warriors. We ride for the Wolf District in 5 nights at midnight under the blood moon. We will raid the trafficking house, retrieve the children, and eliminate everyone involved in this network. Iskander bowed. It will be done. And one more thing, Nicandros added. I want surveillance on every member of this court. If anyone attempts to flee or send warning to the wolves, they are to be detained and brought to me. Is that clear? Crystal, my king. The court remained frozen as Nicandros sat back in his throne, his eyes burning with cold fire. You are all dismissed, except you. He pointed to 3 nobles who had been close to Perdiccas. You 3 will remain and answer questions. The hall emptied quickly, nobles practically fleeing through the doors. When only Nicandros, the 3 detained vampires, and Commander Iskander remained, the king leaned forward. Now, he said softly, tell me everything you know about Perdiccas's dealings with the wolves, and if I sense even a hint of deception, I will make what happened to him look like mercy. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. By the end, Nicandros had a list of names, locations, and transaction details that made his blood run cold. The trafficking network was vast. It spanned 3 kingdoms. It involved not just wolves and rogue vampires, but corrupt human officials, dark mages, and even a few demon brokers from the shadow markets. Children were taken from orphanages, stolen from poor families, kidnapped from the streets. They were categorized by type. Omega wolves for labor markets, gifted humans for magical experiments, hybrids for blood farms, vampire children for their unique properties. Callistos, born under the blood comet, with the power to potentially save their entire race from extinction, was the crown jewel of their inventory. 50,000 night gems was only part of his price. The territorial concessions would have given the Eastern Covens access to hunting grounds that had belonged to Egrius for 1,000 years. Perdiccas had been selling his kingdom piece by piece while pretending to serve it. When the interrogation was over, Nicandros had the 3 nobles placed under house arrest. He would decide their fates after the raid. For now, he had 5 nights to prepare. 5 nights to gather his forces. 5 nights to plan an assault that would burn the trafficking network to the ground. He retired to his private chambers as dawn approached. The sun would rise soon, forcing all vampires to seek shelter in darkness. But before he slept, he wrote a letter. It was addressed to Thaleia, though he had no way to deliver it safely. He wrote it anyway, needing to put his thoughts into words. Brave little Omega, he wrote in careful script. You have given me more than hope. You have given me purpose. When I was lost in grief and failure, you appeared like a light in the darkness and showed me the way home. In 5 nights, I will come for my son. I will come for you. I will come for every child trapped in that terrible place. And when the sun rises on the day after the blood moon, you will never be afraid again. This I swear on my throne, on my crown, on every drop of blood in my veins. Hold on, little one. Your king is coming. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, then moved to the window. The sun was cresting the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere out there, his son was waking in a cage, crying for a father who had failed to protect him. But not for much longer. Nicandros closed the heavy curtains, blocking out the deadly light, and lay down to sleep. And for the first time in 6 lunar cycles, he did not dream of loss. He dreamed of fire, of justice, of a small Omega girl with red hair standing beside a silver-haired prince, both of them finally, blessedly safe. 5 nights, he whispered into the darkness. Just hold on for 5 more nights. The days passed in a blur of preparation. Commander Iskander drilled the loyal guard relentlessly. 20 vampires, each a veteran of countless battles, each sworn to die before failing their king. They studied maps of the Wolf District, learned the layout of the trafficking house from informants, planned entry points and extraction routes. Nicandros spent hours in his armory, selecting weapons, not his ceremonial blades, but the ones he had carried in the old wars, the ones that had drunk the blood of armies. He also prepared for the possibility that the ritual binding Callistos might be more complex than simple captivity. Blood runes, the kind Thalia had described, required specific counter-magic to break. He consulted with the oldest mages in his court, the ones who remembered the ancient binding arts. What they told him was disturbing. If his son had been bound with Macedonian blood runes for 6 lunar cycles, the magic would have begun rewriting the boy's memories, erasing his identity, anchoring his power to whoever controlled the ritual. Breaking such runes required a blood sacrifice. Typically, the original caster's death would suffice. But if the caster was strong, if the runes were reinforced with continuous ritual work, breaking them might require something more. It might require Nicandros to share his own blood with his son in a binding ritual that would forge an unbreakable connection between them. The mages warned him. Such a bond was permanent, absolute. It would link their life forces, their powers, their very souls. Nicandros did not hesitate. If that is what is required to free him, then that is what I will do. On the third night, a message arrived from Thalia. It was delivered by a street child who had been paid to carry it to the cathedral. The note was written in crude letters, clearly by someone still learning to write. King, buyers came early. They are checking the boy, making sure he is ready. They talk about the blood moon. They are excited. Alpha Zarex is nervous. He keeps checking the runes. I think he knows something is wrong, but he doesn't know what. The boy asked about his father again today. I told him what you said. He cried, but he smiled too. Please hurry. Thalia. Nicandros read the note 3 times, committing every word to memory, then burned it. 2 more nights. On the 4th night, reports came back from the surveillance teams. 3 more nobles had attempted to flee the city. They had been detained and were being held in the palace dungeons. 2 others had sent coded messages to contacts in the Wolf district. The messages had been intercepted. The network was panicking. They knew something was coming, but not what or when. Good, Nicandros thought. Let them be afraid. On the 5th night, the night of the blood moon, Nicandros stood in his armory and dressed for war. Black armor, reinforced with vampire steel, blades at his waist, back, and thighs. Vials of counter-magic potions in a belt across his chest. Commander Iskander and the loyal guard assembled in the courtyard, each warrior grim-faced and ready. We do not kill the children, Nicandros reminded them. We do not harm the Omegas unless they attack first. Our targets are Alpha Zarex, his enforcers, any vampire collaborators, and the buyers. Everyone else gets 1 chance to surrender. Only 1. The warriors nodded. And if we encounter runework protecting the prince? Iskander asked. Then I handle it personally, Nicandros said. No one else touches those runes. Understood? Yes, my king. They rode through the streets of Egrius in silence, a column of shadows moving beneath a blood-red moon. The Wolf district was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. Nicandros could smell the wrongness in the air. The scent of dark magic and caged fear. The house stood at the end of a narrow street, lit from within by flickering torchlight. Nicandros raised his hand, and his warriors spread out, surrounding the building. Then he walked up to the front door and knocked. The sound echoed through the night like a funeral bell. A beta wolf opened the door, saw the vampire king standing on the threshold, and froze. "Tell Alpha Zarex," Nicandros said quietly, "that his reckoning has arrived." Then he stepped inside, and hell followed with him.